So, in your Connect groups, we get to talk about marriage. Sandy and I work a lot with married couples and marriage mentoring. And so some of the material, I guess, that we're going to cover in the next couple weeks will be centered a lot on that.
Yep. Sounds good. We love doing marriage mentoring. It's just one of those things that we've been married for 33 years and realized that had we had a little bit more coaching early on, it probably would have saved a lot more grief in our relationship. So because of that, I think that's why it's so important for us to feel like we can give back to other couples and help them skip some of the mistakes that we made. And really, it's not so difficult to communicate and those kind of things. You just need a few basic tools. So when you get those tools, it makes it way easier to understand how the other person is feeling and thinking and how to maybe get along a little bit better and solve some of the disputes that you might have.
So the first thing that we cover a lot of times in the sessions that we have is systems. And what I mean by that is all of us are raised in a system. The system that we're raised in becomes how we learn how to communicate. And every system out there, no matter what system you come from, has some level of dysfunction. Depending on the level of dysfunction depends on how you learn to communicate. A lot of times we think, well, Jesus had a perfect family. No, he had half brothers and sisters, and there was times they were against him, and I'm sure there was playing the favorite, who do you think you are, the Son of God, that kind of thing. I'm sure it happened. So there was favoritism even in his family. But so a system, if you think of the system that you're raised in, some systems are fight all the way through, loudest one wins. That's a system that I was raised in. It would seem like when there was any kind of a conflict, it was run for the hills because it was going to get out of hand. There was never any physical abuse or any throwing of things, that kind of a deal, but it just got really intense. And so the system that I was raised was, if you don't agree with me, it's just because you're not hearing me, so I just need to say it louder. Now, the system that Sandy was raised in, totally the opposite. It was avoid at all costs. So there was an elephant in the room, and you just avoided the elephant. Even though you knew he was there, you didn't look at him. Don't make eye contact with the elephant. Just ignore it, and it'll never go away. And so when our two systems collided when we got married, that's how she learned to communicate, and that's how I learned to communicate. So for her, she would avoid pretty much every discussion that we would have, and I just figured I was right because she quit arguing. So obviously I was the one that was correct.
But not really.
Yeah, that didn't go over very well.
No, not so good.
So in relationships, and if you think about your own relationship, one's usually a pursuer and one's usually an avoider. And both want to resolve conflict, but what happens is the pursuer will pursue the avoider, and they'll just keep going because they need to resolve this. And eventually the avoider will push back or lash out because they need some space. So when that happens, there's usually a blow up, and the pursuer will back off usually. And then the avoider has time to process. And an avoider, if that's who you are, you understand this, you go ahead and solve the problem in your head. And the problem with that is when the pursuer comes back, because they will, because they need resolve and they haven't got it yet, then the avoider will say something like, do we have to keep going over this? Is it always got to be this? We have to keep coming back to this. Well, yeah, because you solved the problem in your head, but you never let me in on the solution. So that's where the problem comes in with pursuer-avoider.
And speaking for the avoider, it's not that we don't want to solve the problem. We do want to solve the problem. I just know that it's really hard to take back things that you say to each other. So it's kind of like putting toothpaste back into the tube. That's pretty hard to do. So once it's out there, it's out there. And so I want to be careful about what I say and how I say it. And so I would tend to shut down because that was easier than saying things that I knew I didn't mean. I was just like mad at the time or that kind of thing. So
Or hurt.
My feelings were hurt, and so it was easier just to retreat and shut down. But what happens when you do that is you end up building a wall between you, and the more distant that you become from each other, the bigger that wall becomes, obviously. So being an avoider, yes, I did want to have to think through, and I did want to process and come up with what I really wanted to say and what I was willing to commit to. But I needed to be heard, and I needed to feel like you really cared enough to listen to what I had to say. And early on, I feel like you were more interested in being right than in really hearing me.
And I don't think it was about being right, because a pursuer doesn't have to be right. They just want to resolve the conflict. And as time went on, and we did learn how our system is, because what happens is if you don't learn this, then what you do is you just create your own dysfunctional system. You get to pass it on to your kids, and then they can pass it on to theirs. That's just how it works. The interesting thing is, as a pursuer, it wasn't that I had to be right. It was that I had to be heard. And if I didn't think she was hearing me, then I would just keep saying it until I got a response. So a lot of times it's poke the bear, not because you want to fight, but because you need a response. You need some kind of a reaction to what that is. So,
and I think that's what's really healthy for us to understand, that probably one of you is a pursuer and one of you is an avoider, and you're probably poking each other right now, talking about, yeah, that's her, that's him. And the reason that's important is because you both do want resolve, and you probably want the same things. So it's just a matter of
doing it healthy.
Doing it in a healthy way.
Yeah. So we always explain it like this. Even if you don't know football or watch football, you've seen a football game. If there's a penalty on the play, what's the first thing that happens? Ref throws a flag.
Yep.
When the ref throws a flag, the play stops, which is a very healthy thing, because now the players who are very emotional go back to their sides, and whether they agree with it or not, they have a chance to calm down. Eventually they'll come back and the ref will give them whatever the penalty is going to be for what they did, and then they resume play. Well, in our relationships, we don't have a ref to follow us around, so we have to throw the flag. And I can guarantee you, flipping a flag out of your belt when you're having an argument with your better half is not a good idea.
It's not going to go well.
No, it's not.
Just saying.
So when we say throw the flag, we present it as a buzzword. And a buzzword is something that you and your spouse know, or you and your partner know, and you use that to stop the play. The secret is learning that when the flag is thrown or the buzzword said, you stop the play. So I think I shared this even in a message once, but our buzzword is we're in the kitchen. Because when we first got married, we had a disagreement in the kitchen, and obviously I won because she left the room and the argument was over, but eventually she came back and pushed back. So from that point on, and we've been married 33 years, we're in the kitchen has been our buzzword, and we use it to this day. If we're at her parents' house, or if we're at somebody's house visiting, and there's something going on between us, instead of just, have you ever been in those situations where a couple blows up and it's like, wow, this is really awkward? Well, a buzzword will stop that. So when we're around people, we'll say, I think we're in the kitchen on this. And it's like, yeah, definitely. And we stop the play. We'll wait because we know that we're going to come back to it. We'll have an opportunity to resolve it.
Just not in front of everybody else.
Yep.
Because that's uncomfortable for you and everyone around who has to observe it. So
most times we're oblivious to the fact that people are around us once you get into the emotion of it.
Yeah.
That's why even in your home, when you're around your kids, if you have children, sometimes you'll go into this rant with your partner, and your kids are right there hearing it, and it's not that you wanted them to hear that, but it just, you didn't pay any attention to the fact that there was somebody else in the room. So the buzzword really helps just to stop the play, have a chance to cool down, depending on the severity of the conversation. You might need to walk outside or to take 10 minutes, or it might be something, we've worked with couples where one is in school. And it's like, I'm studying for a test right now. Probably now's not the time to do this. So they'll throw the buzzword until they can get past this time where they're studying or whatever. And then they can move on to solving the problem maybe tomorrow.
It's kind of like a two-sided coin. When you throw a flag or you say, I need a timeout, it's like you're saying, I need a timeout, which means you can't say something else after that. Not one more jab or one more line, or I'm going to get all this in here and then I'm going to call the timeout. because that's like not playing fair. So
Yeah, you have to learn it.
Yeah, so you don't do that. But it's a two-sided coin in that you get to call the buzzword to say, this needs to stop. The wind is catching the sail. This is not going to be pretty. We know where this goes, and this is not going to be healthy. So play stops. The other side of that coin is you set a time to say, tomorrow after supper, could we talk about this? That would be a better time for me. And then you agree on what that time is going to be so that you do come back, because that's how the pursuer is going to be able to kind of give you some space, because you're both getting what you want, because you both want it to be resolved. It's just a matter of taking some time to cool off or to think through what you want to say before you actually say it.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think couples deal with a lot in their relationship, especially early on, is filters. Mm-hmm. Filters are things that have happened to us either in another relationship or our system that we were raised in. So how we hear things isn't necessarily how they were spoken. So what is said, I've said this in communication, that the audience is always sovereign. What I say doesn't matter. It's what you heard me say that really matters. And if you think of that in your own relationships, multiple times there's been things that were said and it's like, I didn't say that. I mean, I'm sure you've said that multiple times yourself, but I didn't say that. Well, it doesn't matter that you didn't say it. That's what they heard you say. And since perception becomes our reality, that's where the filters play a big part. So there's sometimes when, if there's a disagreement, you have to kind of take a step back and go, okay, so why am I upset about this?
Right.
You know, why did that upset me? Why am I defensive about it? What's the solution to this? Like, what's my reaction? Because a lot of us react instead of respond. Mm-hmm. And that's just not healthy, because it's the reaction that starts going and then you're completely out of control.
And I think that it's important just to remember that I totally lost my train of thought.
Did you?
Totally, yeah.
That's okay. You want to throw the buzzword?
Yeah.
Filters.
I think sometimes that when we do have a filter, it comes from a place that's been wounded in us. Maybe there was somebody that said, well, you'll always be like this, or you're never going to be like that, or you're just like so-and-so. When people say that, it does cause those places in our heart just to be tender. And so if somebody says something to us and it's like, ouch, where'd that come from? Then we go, oh, well, they're going to be just like so-and-so, so I'm not going to talk to them. They're certainly not going to understand. So you just kind of cut them off, because it's a filter that you're seeing them like you saw the other person. And they may be nothing like the other person, but you still tend to see them because there's some things that are being stirred up inside of you that are coming out now in this relationship as well.
Mm-hmm. Another area that we work with is being the best learner and the best teacher. A lot of times they say that marriage relationships are 50-50, and they're not. They're 100-100.
Yeah.
If I don't show her or teach her or share with her what I'm feeling, she's not going to understand it. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you from a guy's perspective, we don't get it. We just don't get it. A lot of times it's like, you should understand this. And it's like, you can talk to 100 guys. We don't get it. Sometimes when we do get it, we'll act like we don't because it's a safer option.
Sometimes. It's kind of like when you don't hear the baby crying in the night, and so you don't have to get up and deal with it. Kind of like
I never did that.
Yeah, maybe just a couple times.
Yeah. So Sandy has referred it or connected it to the example of when we go on mission trips.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when you go on a mission trip, usually if you're in a different country, you can't speak the language. And so we always have interpreters with us. And we're so thankful for them. And just recently, we got to go on the Colombia trip. And it was so cool, amazing people. You know, our hearts were tied to them right away. And of course, there's an interpreter there to help you communicate. And in the end, we had a meeting where we were all sitting at these tables together, and we were sitting across from people from Colombia, some of their team, and it got really awkward because we realized there's no interpreter at our end of the table. The other end of the table, they were fine because there were people that spoke both languages and there was also interpreters, but down at our end there wasn't. And so it was really awkward. We just kind of kept looking at each other and smiling and doing some sign language and some thumbs up, and it was really awkward. So
And we would try.
we tried,
You know, you talk slower, enunciate your words a little louder.
Yeah, it just doesn't help.
And they
So-
did the same thing. So
Yeah, so we did finally pull someone over that actually, Kelly saved the day. So she speaks some Spanish, so she was able to come and help us. And it was a much more productive, enjoyable time because we actually understood what the other person was trying to say.
totally. So being able to teach the other person where you're coming from, or to be able to ask questions. A lot of couples that we work with fall into the same trap of saying the same thing over and over again, just louder, which was kind of my system that I was raised in. But it's like, how do you not understand this? And it's like, well, say it differently, because if I didn't get it the first 2 times you said it, I'm not going to get it the third, because you're saying it the same way. So a lot of times we try to either paint a word picture or give an example or some other method to allow them a different way to hear it.
Also, kind of knowing each other and knowing some people are very auditory. They're auditory learners, so they're going to need to hear something. One of our daughters is an auditory learner, and so she has to hear herself say it in order to process it. And that goes really well because Nathan just loves listening to the same thing being repeated a couple times.
And no matter how many times you tell her, I heard you, she says it again.
Right. So if you're an auditory learner, you're going to need to process verbally. If you are a visual learner, you're probably going to need to see something. And honestly, for this, word pictures work really well for visual learners. So you just kind of tell a story. It's kind of like if I went to work and everybody's eating their lunch and I open up my little sack lunch and realize that, there's nothing in there, and then I felt pretty left out that day. So whatever it is, come up with some sort of an illustration that will help somebody understand and connect to the feeling part of it. Because even though we need to know what each other's thinking, we also want to know, how'd that make you feel? Because that gives us way more information about each other when we know how what we did or what we said made you feel. That helps us understand each other better.
Yeah, and our feelings are our feelings. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just how we felt about the situation. And sometimes it's important to know, this is how I felt. Couple last things. Men usually are fixers. I'm definitely a fixer. So I don't know if you've ever seen the video, but if you look it up on YouTube, the nail in the head, there's a girl that actually has a nail in her head. And she's going, I've got this pain and it's there. And the guy's going, you got a nail in your head. And she's going, stop focusing on the nail. And then she just keeps going on. Well, the difference between men and women are a lot of times men just want to fix it and women just want to be heard. And so something that we've come to the point of is there's times when I jump in to fix and Sandy's going, I want you to fix this. I just want you to listen to me. That takes a lot of pressure off.
Yeah.
So then I can just hear what you're saying.
Right.
But as she's saying it, there's a lot of times I'm still trying to jump in and then she'll just go, don't fix it. It's not about that.
Yeah, and it's really hard because sometimes I don't know if I want him to fix it or not. I mean, maybe I just want him to hear me, and maybe sometimes I want some input or some feedback. But so it's kind of up to us to decide, okay, this is one of those times, I just need you to hear me. And then another time I could come and say, okay, I've been processing this for a while. I just really kind of want some input from you on this. Mm-hmm. So that helps too, to be able to know how to do that.
Yeah. And the last thing this week we'll cover is non-negotiables. And I have brought this up at a message that I shared with, but I think that all couples should come up with non-negotiables that they are not willing to go to. One thing we said was we would never use the word divorce because there's no reason to plant a seed that could eventually grow into something. And a lot of people say that not because they want it, but because they're just frustrated and they say it for effect, I guess. So that's definitely a non-negotiable. Another non-negotiable we have is we go to bed at the same time. I can fall asleep at the drop of a hat, And I used to be watching a show or sports or whatever it was on TV, and Sandy would say, well, I'm going to go up and go to bed. And it's like, well, I'm going to finish this show. 5 minutes after she leaves the room, I'm out cold. And
Right.
an hour later, she's up in the bedroom and she's just madder than a hornet. And she comes down and it's like, I can't believe it, you fell asleep. And it's like, I was watching the show, I fell asleep. Like, what's wrong with that? Total innocent. But the thing was, she was waiting for the show to be over. And after the show, it's like, wow, the show should have been over 20 minutes ago. What's he doing? So we made basically a non-negotiable with each other that we would go to bed at the same time. Doesn't work for everybody. I know there's different schedules where people work different shifts and that kind of a thing. But for the most part, couples can go to bed at the same time, even if they don't go to sleep. Because, like I say, when we go to bed, my head hits the pillow, I'm out, and
I'll stay up and read for a while, or
an hour or two.
yeah, sometimes it is. But another thing that might sound really weird, but think outside the box. Think outside the box. If you want that time together, and some of you are morning people, some of you are night owls, and you're just like two ships passing in the night, and you feel like you don't ever get that quality time where you can feel like you're connecting. Something we have even talked to couples about is go tuck each other in, and then knowingly, I'm going to get up and I'm going to go work on my stuff
Because I'm going to be asleep.
after you go to sleep, but you know I'm getting up and I'm going to go do that, and we're both okay with that. So that way you get your time together, whether it's just to kind of sit and talk for a while, lay and snuggle or whatever, and then you, one goes to sleep, you pray together, and then the other one can get up and go do their other stuff they wanted to work on. So you have to think outside the box sometimes, because it's not always going to be cut and dry. If you're up with kids late at night and you have to get up early, be creative. Be creative, because there's always a solution. There's always a way to make it work. So the biggest thing is come up with your own non-negotiables, because in your family, those are the things that are going to be most important for you guys.
So that should be plenty to keep your group going for the rest of the night, and we will see you next week where we're going to cover communication.
Yep, sounds good.